This is the project that staff have called the Antigua Street Cycle Network, Durham Street to Morehouse Ave. This was originally expected to cost $3.9 million, but now requires an additional $1.2 million. And this is, of course, coming from the Wings to Wheels cycleways. It's almost like robbing Peter to pay for Paul in some respects. What do you make of this? The council never seems to be in a position to save money. I think that's what the problem is, or that's what residents say.
And I think every ratepayer, myself included, wants to ensure that we are getting value for money when we're spending on whatever project it be, whether it be a cycleway or whether it be a road, to make sure that it is the best value. One of the things with this particular cycleway is that I want to ensure that the timing of it is right and that it is coinciding with when the works are still happening at Metro Sports, because I think the last thing any of us want to see is that road being dug up just as we're getting Pakiora Metro Sports open and people are finally starting to enjoy that facility. So I think there's got to be a level of pragmatism that prevails here as well.
Absolutely, I don't disagree. I think those who probably voted against it, Matt, it was more of a symbolic vote, wasn't it, to say that we're spending a lot of money on these types of projects. What do you say?
Yeah, well, as you say, Chris, it looks like it went ahead anyway, irrespective of the group of councillors, and I think the mayor who voted against it. But look, it's really disappointing. The council rates increase has gone up another 0.5% of what they originally thought, so it's now closer to 9%. It's just not good enough. It's blowout after blowout. And what I find very interesting when you read about the proceedings of this meetings, it's always quite binary about, are we just going to accept an increase? I mean, where's the optionality to say, actually, this is the current envelope. These are the things that we can take out of it. There was discussion amongst some councillors that there was too many trees being planted, which kind of confuses me a bit because I thought we were talking about a cycleway. But you can see how these things grow and everyone gets their pet interest. And before we see it, it's not only a cycleway, but it's planting of trees, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of other nice to haves as part of that. And, when the ratepayer quite rightly wants their councils to be laser focused on ensuring that things are delivered on time and to budget, I think, again, many ratepayers will be disappointed, and quite rightly.
Having said that,
and
Matt,
I think... Sorry, but one of the things you raised there, Matt, I think is really important. I mean, I'm not across the details.
I know, I raised it.
This is obviously... But it's like in terms of the fact that it is actually more than a cycleway, and I think it has always been more than a cycleway. It is around the roading network. It is around some of the public space that will be outside Metro Sport, which actually is going to be a great facility for the city. We've got some events already planned to be coming up there, and do want to make sure we have the right options. But look, I'm all for making sure we're getting value for money. When I became Minister of Greater Christchurch Regeneration, I stripped out the imported Italian marble that the previous government had cladding that building.
Italian marble? How dare you?
Right.
That would have been lovely, Megan.
And the marble in the car park as well, that went. So we do have to make sure that there is value for money that is going there, but we also have to make sure that we're getting fantastic facilities for Christchurch.
So you're saying if the Metro Sports facility looks boring, we'll blame you for getting rid of the Italian marble?
I think it is going to look beautiful, and I think we're already seeing some of those decal panels that have gone up along Antigua Street that have been produced locally with the kind of carving motifs in them.
Oh, that'll be lovely.
I tell you that Italian marble that would have caused one of your cost blowouts, Chris.
I'm going to be kind
one
here.
Of your cost blowouts.
Oh, love a good cost blowout. I want to be kind here and also say Antigua Street, I mean, that is one of the main thoroughfares, though, for cyclists, isn't it, Matt? I mean, when I'm driving down, ironically, Morehouse Ave, you often see a lot of cyclists there, and they use that bridge further on near that calf. So maybe it's not such a bad thing after all. I guess the concern remains, though, it's just another $1.2 million spent, and that's a concern.
Yeah, but this is all very nice for those people who might be cycling through the CBD. But, what about the commuters who are stuck on Lincoln Road in Addington, in many other parts of the roading network, and they're frustrated that cost has been taken from other parts. And quite rightly, they're looking at this and saying, well, it's a nice to have, well, it's a great little planting, and we'll get some nice trees and cycleways. And look, I don't disagree with the provision of some level of cycleways through the city, but yet again, they'll be looking at it and saying another blowout, and this is going to have knock-on effects. And when people are driving through roads that are just endlessly being pulled up and relayed, and the cost of that as well, people are going to start scratching their head and saying, well, what is this council actually doing? Is it laser focused on reducing cost and reducing my rates? And when you see things like this, I can see why people get frustrated.
Yeah. Absolutely. But leaving it and digging up the road again after the works have already finished, I think that's going to annoy people. That would annoy me because, A, it will cost more money. And I think we just want to see that facility up and running and people able to get to it and enjoy it. So nothing is cheaper than it will be today when it comes to infrastructure. That's one of the things I've learnt over the years. So delaying it is going to cost more in the long run.
Need to move on. The Health Minister, Simeon Brown, has written to the Pharmacy Council demanding, I suppose you could say, a please explain after it was revealed the Pharmacy Council has forced cultural competency test for pharmacists. Now, Matt, to you on this one first. I mean, knowing our history is incredibly important, but it is argued that this goes too far, pushing ideology over, real-world situations. In fact, this report even suggests that it is about two ideologies. In some respects, Western ideology and Māori ideology. I mean, what do you say on this?
Well, things have gone too far, clearly, and this is partly the legacy of Megan's last government that has left the health system in the state. Look, no one disagrees with cultural competency if we think about our workforce, especially in the area I know very well in mental health. We need a culturally competent workforce that can work in a te ao Māori world, as well as many Asian residents of New Zealand as well, and to be able to work with them to get better care. But what happens when you insert statements like, honouring the treaty, then people go off with their own interpretations of this. And we see this with the pharmacy that we're talking about today. And what people want is they want timely access to support. They want to know that we're ensuring that there's a workforce, that there's a real focus on prevention and early intervention, and a real effectiveness of the services we're delivering. And quite often when you look at some of the barriers we've got, it's actually the professional bodies themselves that are creating the barriers, and it should be a responsibility, whether it be pharmacy or other professional bodies like the Medical Council, for actually drilling down a laser focus and removing all these barriers. So actually putting barriers in the way of stopping people, making sure that they've been able to deliver medicines to people is very concerning, and we've got to start stopping this.
Megan, pharmacists are expected to explain the impacts of pre- and post-Te Tiriti events on the health of New Zealanders. Thoughts?
So, Chris, I went and had a look at the competence standard because preparing for this, just Good. To actually look at what it asks. So one of them is explain the relevance of Te Tiriti to the provision of healthcare and how its implementation may help pharmacists contribute to equitable health outcomes for Māori. So I think we just do need to take a reality check. It's a very light touch standard in terms of knowing there is a treaty and how that might impact on health outcomes. And look, there's one number for me that we have to realise, and that is Māori have die 7 years younger than non-Māori in New Zealand. So when we are talking about health outcomes, we know that there are some real-world implications of this. I don't see this as a matter of ideology, Chris. I mean, I guess you're talking to a New Zealand historian, so I think knowing our history
but actually,
is
to be fair,
incredibly important.
I've read that too, but actually it specifically states ideologies, bringing two ideologies together. In its introduction, it actually says that.
Well, I think that word, I think it's important not to get caught up on. I think when we're talking about ideology, people are often talking about ideology in terms of political ideology of the day. What they're talking about really is the bringing together. What the treaty did was bring together two world views, and there were different views that came together in the 19th century when the treaty was signed. So I think it's important not to get too hung up on this word. I mean, I've heard some people say that that pharmacists are leaving because of this. I can tell you, I've spent a lot of time speaking to pharmacists in my electorate. I can tell you what the thing that's driving them out of business, and that is taking away the free prescriptions, putting the surcharge back on prescriptions, and driving their customers back to the big multinational pharmacies and away from community pharmacies. And that is a much bigger concern, because I think actually people having that link with their community pharmacist is an incredibly important part of our health system.
Megan, though, but in this report, which I've read too, it says pharmacists must also be familiar with Māori health models, such as Te Pai Mangho Tonga, which, according to the Ministry of Health, refers to the Southern Cross constellation.
Look, Chris, I think having our pharmacists aware of our health system is really important, all the different models that are operating within it. I don't know the detail of that model, and I can't get into a debate about whether or not that's relevant, because I don't know.
But just hearing that, I mean, should pharmacists be across the Southern Cross constellation when it comes to health needs of New Zealanders?
But Chris, I would want to go and have a look and see exactly what is in that health model. But I'm saying I'm not going to get into the detail of it. I don't know the detail of it. But do I think that it's important that our pharmacists understand the different cultures walking through their door and what might be driving some of the health outcomes that we see in this company that are unacceptable? If we just concentrate on that, the life expectancy of Māori in this country is 7 years shorter than it is for Pākehā New Zealanders. That's not okay, and we've got to make sure that we are putting in place a health system that doesn't just accept that is okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, but Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Chris, sorry. The problem we've got here is a lot of the professional bodies in our medical professions and allied health are quite removed from the realities, right, of the needs of the health system. And when you look at the principle of unmet need, I would have thought it's this professional bodies and others to be laser focused to take any barriers away to ensure that we get as many people to reduce that unmet need as possible. So when you put these barriers up and it stops people either wanting to enter the profession or stay in the profession, or actually, to be quite candid, just doing their job, that's a real concern.
But Matt, I can tell you, sorry, Chris, saying that the professional body's removed from the realities of everyday life. He's either the head or the former head of the Pharmacy Guild, owns a chemist in my electorate, and I know that his chemist in pharmacy has a huge number of vulnerable people walking through the door from a whole range of cultures. And I don't think I'd find a health professional that isn't more connected than that former head of the Pharmacy Guild to what the challenges for many in terms of access to our health system would be. They're out there, they're in community pharmacies, and I just hope people can keep going to community pharmacies, because such an important part of it.
You make a very good point, Megan, and that is there are many pharmacists across Christchurch, across New Zealand, that have their customers, their patients are multicultural, multi-ethnic people from all diverse backgrounds and countries. So why does that not apply to them as well? I mean, we have a huge Indian population here in Christchurch, but in the same time, we're not being told, or the pharmacists are not being told, they must learn Indian culture or Indian myths and ways of doing things.
So, Chris, I mean, it comes back to the fact that the treaty is our founding document in this country. It is that in terms of our history and being multicultural and understanding all of our cultures doesn't have to come at the expense of understanding the role of the treaty in our history and how it's made us the modern country that we are. In fact, that I find some of the people that are most interested in understanding the treaty and understanding the way it works and its foundation to New Zealand as a nation of many in our newly arrived communities within our ethnic communities. That you'll go to events and there'll be a Māori welcome at various multicultural events. So I don't see the two things as opposed, Chris.
Okay, Matt, I'll give you the final word before we move on to chlorination.
Yeah, well, I think part of the issue is the legacy of the last government when they put in things like honouring the treaty very broad. Then what we've had is in some professional bodies, we've had that captured by some groups very ideologically, who are very disconnected from the front line. So that's why you get the practitioners on the front line saying, actually, this isn't helpful for us. This is actually a barrier. And what we need is some of those professional bodies to actually start coming up with the solutions rather than putting on these ideological frameworks that actually just increase the barriers to timely care.
I've got to say, it's funny.
Matt, once upon a time, the National Party used to say, honour the treaty as well. I think we've heard a succession of people from Jenny Shipley and Chris Finlayson talking about the role in which previous national governments did that. I think it's just a shame that your National Party is walking away from that.
We're not walking away from it, Megan,
well,
but actually
you're saying
what
it,
we're
Matt.
seeing
You're
now,
here
if you let
saying
me finish, what we're not walking away from, what we're saying is actually the changes under your last government. And when you look at the Māori Health Authority and all the increased bureaucracy of that has actually led to these issues on the ground. We need our professional bodies now to get connected back to the barriers that these are causing, listening to their members, because it's their members that are raising these issues with their own professional bodies that are creating barriers for them to get out and do the work they do. And that's what we're about.
And that's exactly the way for it to happen. This is a professional body. They will have their debates within it. But to say that this is because of the ideology of the previous government is just utter nonsense, Matt. Let's actually have debates about the fact that we have life expectancy that is 7 years shorter for Māori in this country. And let's just not, I mean, I think the way in which we're getting caught in sideshows like this, I would have preferred we'd spent the time talking about what we're doing as a country to create a health system that is going to reduce that 7 year gap that there is for non-Māori in terms of for between Māori and non-Māori in life expectancy.
But Megan, you had 6 years to do that, and your legacy is the issue we're debating now, and more barriers to timely care.
Matt, let's not reduce everything down to sound bites like that. That 6 years is not going to turn around any more than I expect you to have turned it around in 18 months. These are long run and they are deeply ingrained reasons in our society of why we have life expectancy gaps like that. Let's have a mature and adult debate and keep away from the sound bites on it.
No, it's about listening to the members and the professionals on the ground.
And no one's saying
this
you
is
shouldn't.
What they're saying, and we should back
No
them
one's
for
saying
that.
you shouldn't, Matt, but you're sitting there saying this is the legacy of the previous government. I'm saying please lift the debate and let's have a real and grown-up conversation about it.
Well, I think most Kiwis will see it for what it is, Megan.
Can I also just point out after the story that was written that hundreds of pharmacists have contacted us, and I still get emails today saying they are frustrated by the new standards, but they are fearful of speaking out for losing their registration. Megan, just finally, your comments on that.
And look, this is a debate that the Pharmacy Guild need to have. It is their professional standards. This is not the realm of governments. And it is something, and I mean, I always think that people need to be able to make their voices heard and they need to be able to put their view forward. If they do have an issue with it, then there needs to be a debate amongst pharmacists about their professional standards. But
I mean, that they fear fearful. Isn't it sad though they fearful of speaking out or putting their name to anything because they fear they will be cancelled or their registration will go because they happen to disagree with the standards which they claim are ideology based?
Yeah, and Chris, one of the things that I think is incredibly sad is I think that there's just fear about growing all around within so many communities about saying things and doing things, that whether it's being cancelled for an ideology, as you put it, or other people being fearful for their safety, I think that actually we're getting into a divided community in a way that I have never seen in my lifetime. That, we need to get back to being able to agree to disagree and to do that in a really civil way, and understand that actually our communities is made even stronger when we have people with a range of views. And so I always want people to be able to have informed debates, but they do need to be informed debates from all sides of it.
We are vastly moving out of time, so we won't discuss chlorine. I think another issue that we do need to discuss is the citizens' arrest power. Matt, to you, good or bad? I mean, at the same time, it's allowing citizens to stop offenders at any time during the day, being able to restrain them. I mean, isn't this the job of police?
Sorry, is that for me, Chris?
Yes, that's for you. Sorry, I've pushed the wrong button.
That's okay. Look, I think a great announcement this week. I mean, law and order is something that we took to the election in 2023. We got a clear mandate. When you look at how out of control issues like ram raids and retail crime have been under the last government, up 91%, just not good enough. When you look at citizens' arrest, I mean, that's actually in the Crimes Act at the moment, but restricted between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. So all we're doing is expanding that and allowing people to conduct citizens' arrest during the day. I mean, what I would say, pragmatically, every individual has to make that assessment for themselves around the safety of intervening. But we did hear very loud and clear from our small business owners, our dairy owners, our retail businesses, that this is what they wanted, and that's why we have announced that we'll be introducing this.
Megan, to you on this, because once upon a time I was a loss prevention officer at Farmers Colombo Street, and the stuff that we got up to there would be deemed illegal now. I mean, thankfully we had the police kiosk right across the Christchurch Square, so if somebody stole something they were there quick smart. The trouble is though, now when I talk to retailers that do the similar job, they say if somebody steals something, police don't really turn up anymore. Or if somebody at a supermarket steals a whole thing of meat, they walk out the door because nothing can be done. I mean, I was at the local chemist warehouse and I said, how's it all going to the security guards? And they said to me, I'm not quite sure why we're here, because if somebody steals something, we can't actually do anything. We just watch them say, thanks, have a great day. I mean, in some respects, it's this rebalancing where things have gone a bit too skew-if.
And Chris, I just want to go back on a couple of things. First of all, Farmers Colombo Street, that's going back a few years now, isn't it?
I know, it was my favourite job. Remember, it was right next to the Christchurch Library. Good times, great people.
A different Christchurch. But
if somebody stole, we drag them back in, baby.
I think the couple of points that you make are really important, and that is the role of the police in this. And I've been listening to a number of reports on this over the course of the week after the announcement, and people talking about the kind of the training that police get in order to be able to do this and to be able to be kept safe. I mean, I've also heard from a number of retailers that while they're really frustrated, and obviously frustrated and rightly frustrated about people shoplifting, that they're not convinced that this is the solution either. Like, how are they going to do this? What's it going to look like? What do the practicalities look like? And I think the point you make about how quickly will the police get there, Chris, because it's really meant to be just a holding pattern to the cops arrive, essentially. And one of the things we're seeing is actually there's fewer police now than when this government came into power. We're not seeing that growth in police numbers. We're certainly not seeing that community policing. So we need to ensure that we actually are backing this up. It's one of those things that looks pretty in an election pamphlet. We're going to bring in citizens' arrest, but when you get into the details and the practicalities of what it looks like, I think there's going to be a great deal of debate over reasonable force, and I think that's something that's going to come into play a lot. And I think that we have to make sure that we're not just putting additional burden on retailers who are actually going to feel quite unsafe safe. And then you worry to what extent this will mean that people that are committing these crimes will actually start carrying knives more, all those kind of things. So I think making sure that we've actually got enough police is critical to it. But also, I mean, one of the things that we have seen, and I think was a shocking statistic that came out in the recent Salvation Army report, is an over 100% increase in methamphetamine use in New Zealand. If we look at some of those drivers of crime that exist, and meth use has got to be one of the biggest ones, and we're just seeing an explosion of that in the last year, and that is something that we've got to make sure that we're getting a handle on.
Matt, final say, then we need to go.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Megan's talking about, the lack of presence of police. Leanne Watson, head of Canterbury Chamber of Commerce, just recently out in the public and the media talking about the influence of the community police teams around the CBD in Christchurch. It's made a big difference. I think if you were to be out on the street and talk to most Cantabrians, they would say that they're feeling a lot safer. Ram raids have greatly reduced, and our interventions are resulting in them feeling safer on the streets. And this is just another thing that we said we would do. A government comes in and should be delivering on what they stood on a mandate for. This is what we've done, and that's why we're delivering it. And I think that's what people want us to do.
We're out of time.
Just going to leap in there. There are more in the CBD. You're absolutely correct. And that's because I've been taken out of neighbourhood community policing. So I can tell you, in the communities I represent, they're not seeing as many police because you haven't grown police numbers to do it. Matt, you've shifted the deck chairs.
Well, I think we can agree to disagree about that one, Megan.
Megan Woods and Matt Doocey, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Matt.